You know what? I think I start every episode at this point, like, oh my God, this is going to annoy some people, but it might do. But I hope it's a healthy discussion because there is say this. And I will say this has come from LinkedIn, which isn't often somewhere I get huge amounts of inspiration because I'll be frank with you. Who's been on LinkedIn lately and gone, oh, what's that? You walked past a homeless guy and you revamped their CV and now like award-winning some sort of billionaire crypto boy, and it's all thanks to you. If you just be kind, remember who you like all that BS, right? However, this was somebody talking. It was a woman who put up things saying, "Why aren't there more women in professional photography?" And I was like, "Huh, but there are. I've got mates in it. I've got people who are in it." And then I was like, I don't know if that's I think that's the wrong question because clearly women are in photography. Women are on courses, in photography groups, buying cameras, running shoots, shooting weddings. I've seen some creating communities, consuming education, and building a business. If you walk into spaces, you will find women there for the most part. I think the problem is that why are more women disappearing before long-term professional stability, visibility, and authority? And the reason why I say it like this is because in that response, in that LinkedIn question, there was responses there predominantly from men who work in the education system or run groups who were saying, "No, I've got women in my classes. I've got predominantly women in my courses." And it was weird that they were the teacher and they were all male. And then us females who were responding, we were not the teacher, we were not the head honchos, we were not the ones in charge. We were like, "Oh no, I know some friends who are photography." And this guy was saying, yeah, there's more people who, in his experience, who teach photography who are male, and a lot more students who are women. And that was kind of like, I wonder why that is. Is it because women don't like teaching, or there must be something else in there, right? So I think it's somewhere between learning photography, trying to monetize it, build a business, perhaps becoming parents, or remaining as parents. That sounds weird, doesn't it? And navigating industry culture, surviving financially, which we're all trying to do, dealing with online spaces, balancing caregiving, and trying to stay visible. We lose a lot of people, and often women. And I don't think it's because women lack talent. I think it's far more complicated than that. And just before everyone starts foaming at the mouth, oh, Candy's being mean to men. Men, it's going to be another one about men are evil. No, get over yourself. There are some fantastic men in this industry, supportive men, mentors, educators, people who actually try to make photography more inclusive and sustainable. And there are women who are absolutely thriving in photography too. This isn't men bad, women good, because we're not that stupid, right, to think that's what this episode's about. I think this is more about culture in the industry, societal expectations, economics, visibility, caregiving, confidence, bias, safety, burnout, and a thousand other tiny pressures that build up over time. But I also want to acknowledge something incredibly important here before we continue. I am speaking from my own perspective as a white woman in photography, and that comes with privilege. And while can absolutely speak on the misogyny, the inequality, the microaggressions, being underestimated, or navigating life and career pressures, women of color often experience completely different layers of exclusion on top of that. So this episode isn't me pretending I speak for everybody. It's me opening the conversation so you can go, oh, she's not hating on men. She just wants us to discuss it. Because honestly, I'd encourage people who are listening to go and seek out experience of photographers from different backgrounds directly, because in this industry is vast and this is not a universal experience for everybody. Okay. Now, I think women have always been in photography. That's one thing I think that's been forgotten in many conversation. Women have always been here. This isn't new. You've got photographers like Dorothea Lange, Vivian Meyer, and Annie Leibovitz. Women have shaped photography historically, but historically, men have often received more institutional recognition, more funding, more technical credibility, more visibility, and more, in quotes, genius status. I think that's because society didn't give women equal rights for a very long time, and even now we're pushing against it. And even if you go into any field like science, Marie Curie's husband took the accolade, for she didn't win it, he did. And then even then she couldn't be known by her own name. There's lots of things involved in it. Lots of women in arts had to hide behind men's male pen names. It isn't new, okay? It isn't new. And I do think there are remnants that have remained a little bit. This is not necessarily through some sort of cartoon villain sexism, but through systems, expectation, and culture. Because I genuinely do not think there is some secret evil meeting where men gather together and plotting to remove women from photography. I don't think there is. I think, however, there is something very subtle, more subtle than that. I think it's thousands of tiny structural pressures that slowly wear people down over time. Okay. But I want to talk about the drop off point now. Okay. Because again, women are entering photography, as the people on that status said. The issue is, why are they not staying in it? Because one of the guys said, "Oh, I have an 80% female ratio demographic, sorry." And then I asked him, "Hey, how many of them go into photography?" "Oh, I don't know, show not many." Okay, so I had a quick look and I was thinking, okay, so who are the main key speakers in our industry? Who become technical ambassadors? Who gets platformed repeatedly? Who gets called industry experts? Who are treated as serious artists? Who survives financially for 10 years plus? Who dominates commercial spaces? And I do think you start to see a shift. Now, that might be because some women don't want to be on those platforms. They don't want to be put on those platforms. They don't want to speak. They don't enjoy it. They don't push themselves forward. But sometimes I think the industry sometimes confuses with women participating with women being able to sustainably say, and that's quite a mouthful. It's sustainably sustain. Oh, I can't say it. Say, I even wrote this script, just so you know. Like, I wrote this. Being able to sustainably stay. That's it. They're not the same thing, okay? Women are in photography. They are participating in photography, but how many women are making careers in it? They're the same as like men. But if you look, go to any show that is for all the photography industry and have a look, okay? How many are in there? How many? And it's odd when the numbers aren't even close to balance. I saw a lineup for one photography show. There was only 4 women out of 30 speakers, which was a bit like, oh, but then equally they may not be putting themselves forward. So we need to, round this off. But it got me thinking, because women are known for doing something called the invisible labor. Okay. There is photography genres that are often associated with women by certain people, and they're culturally undervalued despite requiring enormous skill. I might have mentioned about the whole issue with the guy who said that wedding photography is the lowest form of photography. Ugh, gross, hate him. But people talk about newborn photography, family. And I have to say, we also have to acknowledge these. You require technical adaptability, people management, business management, emotional intelligence, logistics, marketing, editing consistency, customer service. You are basically photographer, therapist, project manager, crisis negotiator, and emotional support human simultaneously. And yet there are genres that are often treated more serious than those. People consider fashion, commercial, street, and I would say fine art as more serious, especially fine art. I've seen that as kind of around. I remember having a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago. They're a fine art photographer in London, and I was having a meeting. They go, "Oh yeah, I'm a photographer." I went, "Oh, that's amazing. What do you shoot?" He went, "I'm a fine art photographer. I shoot my art." And I was like, "Oh, cool." He goes, "And you?" I said, "Oh, I have a portrait studio." And he went, "Mm-hmm." And it was just like me. I know it's an individual. Okay, I'm not hating on generalization, but it was just okay. I'm aware now there's elitism in what you shoot. I think sometimes it's, how do I say this? I think that that says something interesting about how creative labor gets valued, because women are often carrying huge sections of the industry emotionally and commercially, while not always receiving equal authority or respect. If you think about it, if more than half these classes have women, women are consuming products more than the men are, right? I mean, the problem, maybe the men are buying more, but if 80% of your class are women, they are buying potentially 80% of what that class is purchasing in photography aspects, okay? Maybe not so much, maybe they're borrowing, but the fact is they hold the most because there are 80% of them. So I'm wondering why that reflection, if so many are in classrooms, as these guys are saying, why are they not then out there in the field? Maybe they're quieter, maybe they're hidden. But it got me thinking, because while I'm not a mother, one of my friends is, and she says being a photographer and being a mother is really difficult. The hours are chaotic, income can often be unstable, and you have to keep working. You're expected to post constantly, stay visible, attend meetings, workshops, answer inquiries, edit late at night, travel, work weekends. Now, when you combine that with the fact she is a mother and she has a home, she says pretty much, even though my husband works 9 to 5, I am the one doing the majority of the childcare, looking after the household, doing the shopping, making sure his clothes are done. Not, and it might be that her husband's a douchebag. I don't know. But it seems to me that the stats have already said that women are doing the most childcare in a home on average. They're doing most of the household chores on average. And it went as far as she was saying, like, she has to get a babysitter on the weekends because her husband will not give up his golf game because it's for him, but she has to work and he gets annoyed. I could also say this isn't just unique to this relationship or this industry. My friend is a barrister. When her mum got sick, Her brothers assumed that she would take her mum in and she would look after her. Her brothers live 20 minutes away from their mum. My friend lives an hour and a half away from her mum, and away from all her doctors, which meant my friend was doing an hour and a half journey there and back. So 3 hours to go take her mum to a basic appointment. The brothers never offered to collect the mum once, and in fact didn't see the mum for 2 months and only popped in just to see how she was because it was her birthday. They don't call, they don't write, nothing. And what was really uncomfortable was seeing my friend having to do all the cooking and all the cleaning for her mum while she was trying to maintain her job. And when she reached out to her brothers to help out, perhaps pay towards a PA, they were like, no, why do we need that? You're her daughter, like sort it out. But when she asked her brothers to come and help, they refused, saying, oh no, I don't know how to do that. No, no, that's weaponized incompetence. You could go learn how to do this. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, again, these are rare examples, I would like to think, but even in her life, even as a barrister, she had troubles. And then when she went back to work, she was berated at work because she had to spend mornings doing stuff with her mum, and she took a lot of holiday at some point. And she was like, "Well, I'm looking after mum." Yeah, but we still need you here. So even then, it's sort of filtered into other industries. Okay. And she was actually told if she wants to progress in her career, she needs to be more dedicated. Regardless of the fact that her mum is very, very sick on her deathbed, it was more important her career, and they basically gave her no leeway, but she was expected to look after her mum from her family unit and also create her business. It was really difficult for her. And in the end, she ended up hiring a PA. And again, her brothers still have not visited. Brilliant. Probably show up next year when it's their mum's birthday. Brilliant. Do you know what? She said I might have to take some time off to look after my mum. And it's not because she isn't talented. It's not because she's not ambitious for a career. It's because there is pressure on her to be the main care provider. Okay. Now, I've got friends who are mothers who are photographers, and they say they do a lot of the care provision for their children. A friend of mine, she has it written in the school documents that they call the father first before they call her, because she's self-employed. She can't just drop everything if she's on a shoot. The father is the estate agent in an office around the corner. The school still call the mother, no matter how many times she's told them. She's like, I'm working, I can't get there. Call their father. Oh, but they're asking for the mother. Call their father. He's also a parent. Okay. I mean, and that's from another woman, like, just who calls her up, and she's like, "But don't you want to be here for your?" Shut up! You're both made a baby. You're both parents. You're both capable of parenting. And if you can't parent your child, then you've deliberately weaponized that, so you absolve yourself any responsibility. No, I hate it. I think I have to be really careful here when I want to say something that not all women become mothers, so this isn't a main issue, but it is an issue I think it needs to be acknowledged. I am not a mother. I've got friends who are, and this is also not to say that fathers don't struggle. Plenty of men struggle balancing creative careers and parenting too, but societally, caregiving expectations are still disproportionately affect women in many and most households, and the creative industry often hasn't built that reality in their mind. All right, that's where I'm going. Okay. Photography also massively rewards visibility. And I think we need to be honest about that. There are people who rise faster than others because they're willing to self promote constantly, network a lot, dominate conversations, speak with authority, and take up space publicly. Now, that's not an issue for me. I don't think that's an issue, but there is an issue where the same behaviors are rewarded quite differently depending on the perceived gender. For example, I went to an event, and there was a photographer there, male photographer, who how do I put this? Was quite obnoxious in the fact that when people were talking to him, he'd cross his arms, lean back, and he would literally put his fingers to his lips. And I thought, oh, he's talking. He went, no, no, I'm asking you to be quiet. And it was so passively aggressive, ridiculous. And people laughed. Right? People laughed. And yet, in that same conversation, not 5 minutes later, one of the women was interrupted while she was telling a story constantly by this one person. And she said to this person, hey, hey, let me tell the story before you interrupt again. It wasn't horrible. It wasn't rude. It wasn't, you're interrupting, nothing. And then someone go, oh my God, you're so gobby at her. And I was like, hang on a minute, this guy here literally does a passive aggressive finger to the lips to shut up people. And she just says, hey, can you let me tell a story without interrupting? Why is this an issue? Okay. I think also I have been labeled too much. I know that's not my fault. You're too little. Aggressive in how I present. No, passionate. It's funny. How am I aggressive? Aggressive offers like a violent nature. No, I'm passionate about what I think. And cocky. Apparently, having knowledge and sharing that knowledge and correcting thought processes such as engagement pods makes me cocky. It doesn't make me cocky. It makes me anti-gatekeeping and telling you not to waste your time. We are in business. I am not here to fluff it for you. You want to know straight away what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. You don't need me to go, and then my dog's kitten ran over, and then I got, like, bollocks to that. I'm just telling you straight. And to the women listening now, you know exactly what I mean, right? But I want to tell you, I found something really strong. I talked about it in a previous episode on this podcast. So this is a great time. You can like, subscribe, and hit that bell button so you don't miss a single episode. 'Cause we bring them out every single week, both here on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and on YouTube, as well as a YouTube video every week that is not related, but you can learn something with behind the scenes and what I get to. Anyway, let's go back to it. I learned very quickly if I stop apologizing for who I am and how I present myself, people react differently. I am okay if people tell me I take up too much space. You know why? Because that means you left room for me. That means you could have taken that space and I wouldn't have minded. But that means there is space there. I'm taking it. Okay. I want to be bigger than I am now. I want to have a presence. I want to be a voice in photography that doesn't stand for certain things and does stand for others. I want to educate people. I want to talk about these conversations. I don't want to shy from these conversations. These are literally conversations I had at the photo show with my friends. Okay. I want to discuss this in an open public space without like hushed tones. I think we were buying like the coffee bit. We were like, yeah, it's really weird, isn't it? Do you know what? When my model pointed out she said we were at an event and my model said, "Am I the only non-white model here?" And I was like, "How many models are here?" So we counted up. We counted 14 models, all of them white or white presenting. That's something I need to say. And I was like, I'm sure what was that? But it was the fact they were all pale toned skin. And she was like, "Oh, right." And do you know how many people stopped? I'm like, "Oh my God. Oh my God." Someone literally said to my model, "I've always wanted to photograph a black girl." That's tokenism. You've dismissed our, like, it's been my fantasy to photo. Like, you could have booked one. You could have got one. Like, why do you use that term? It's weird. I found it weird. She found it weird. But I also want to talk about microaggressions and why women's group exist and matter to exist. Okay. People love dismissing microaggressions as small, but enough small things become a culture. It's assumptions about technical ability, being mistaken for the assistant, being spoken over. And this also happens with people who are young, by the way. So this isn't just a woman thing. It can be your age can be an issue. Gear conversation become weirdly gatekeepy. Women constantly needing to prove expertise. I was once asked what educational qualifications I had to talk about photography because it was really important. And I was like, okay, did you ask all the rest of the panel? And they're like, no. Oh, so the only female you wanted to ask? Well, it's really important to know what you're talking about. Okay, cool. Would the rest of the panel like to answer? And this guy suddenly got really uncomfortable having asked me that. Like, I could have answered, but the fact is, he never asked anybody anything else. It was all about, and what qualifications have I got? Well, he was very impressed when I reeled them off. His face squirmed. But anyway, I also think online comments focus a lot on how women look and present rather than what they say. And this has been proven once again on my own Instagram reels where my friend who was male said something, but I got berated for what he said. And also they made comments on how I said it, like how I vocalized it, but not about the fact that he had said it. I was like, okay, that's where it comes from. I remember being at the photo show years ago and two male photographers were looking at my work it was on the People's Gallery. That's how long ago this was. And I was a picture of a Will smoking a cigar. Don't do it, kids. I think was he smoking a cigar? Anyway, it was up on the People's Gallery and two photographers were admiring it and I was looking at it on the wall, like behind them. And my mate was with me and my mates, they were talking about how lovely the light was. I was very proud. I could also see once it was blown up all the mistakes I made, but and my friend was really excited, said, "Oh, my friend made this, da, da, da." And these two men looked around at me, having just praised the work, thinking no one was overhearing them. And please note, I died of embarrassment when my friend said this, but I appreciate she's my hype girl. And one of the guys turned around and went, "So did you sleep with him?" I was like, "Sleep with who?" "The him." And I went, "No." And they just looked at me and smirked. Would you ask that of another photographer? Would you? I don't know. Was it because I was a woman you thought you could ask? Now, again, this is individuals. But do you know what? It's really funny when I tell this story, people aren't often surprised. I remember being at the Northampton Remembrance Sunday parade, and I was in my spot. Kirsty, the press photographer, was on her way. My mate Stu was there, and Paul Lawrence, who's another photographer. We were all there ready to shoot in our little spots. We've all got our own spots. It's quite funny. We all meet up like a reunion there. And this guy who wasn't part of the group, but I had no idea who he was, and it's also not my place to dictate who could stand there, decided to push into the spot I was still on, literally just back into me to move me out the way with his butt. And I was like, "Excuse me, stop." And he turned around and went, "Oh, hi, Khandie." Now, I did vaguely recognise him, and his name shall forever not be mentioned at this point. But we were talking about photography and how, oh, if you'd gone at the time we were talking about if you're going mirrorless, we were talking if you're going mirrorless. I'd already gone mirrorless. I think Stu had already gone mirrorless. And we were talking about, do we like it? Like, and this guy, straight to my face said, "I don't think women make good photographers because they haven't got a technical brain." And I was like, "I'm sorry, you what?" I thought I misheard him. I just swear Stu and Paul took a step back instantly. I did not let that lie. I corrected him and then booted him out of the spot that he had used his ass to get into. Like, dude, you backed into the spot I'm already set up on. Bugger off. Go away. And again, the thing that made me laugh is Stu and Paul would never think that. They would never say that. And but there were people laughing around us thinking that was funny. That's not funny. That belittled me and implied that my brain is no less capable than theirs. Like, my brain is not as capable as his. And I would just turn around and went, "Look, one of us is getting paid, and guess what? It ain't you." So, but I also think it's weird then when this does happen, and it could be just individuals, when people create dedicated spaces where their likelihood of them encountering that kind of behavior is removed, right? She Clicks, Shoots Like a Girl, Boca Bells, the UK Black Female Photography Group. These groups exist because many women wanted spaces where they felt heard, encouraged, could ask questions without ridicule, weren't constantly underestimated, could network safely, could discuss experiences openly. And I think a lot of this also is that sometimes certain areas of photography can feel like the old boys club. I if you go into a boudoir, oh my God, if you go into one of those boudoir photo groups on Facebook, and I know it's on Facebook, but you see stuff and you're like, "Oh, that's so distasteful." I know it's a personal thing, but you know the one, like, can we stop putting the high heel in the back of the knickers and have it like dangle? Can we stop that? There's also a guy who regularly posts a picture where the corset is upside down, and no matter how many times we tell them the corset is upside down, it makes the image look silly. Because it's so obviously upside down, and he just keeps posting it, and refuses to listen to any of the women. He basically deletes your comment after a while, and then he just puts heart emojis and smiles on anyone who says how great it is. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Okay. Um, I also think there is backlash against some of these groups. I have seen at the UK Black Female Photography Group had people going up. Don't mind, they were giving away headshots for free. Had people going up and like, "Why have you got one? Why do we need one?" Because you and I know racism exists. You and I know, like, we've lived in this world where we've seen people just abused for no reason, purely based on the color of their skin. Why can't we create safe spaces? They are very open. They share their work with you. They just say that, look, to be in our group, so to understand what we've gone through, because we are aware of this, right? We are adult. You are in this world with me. You have seen this, right? What is such a problem? Instead, they got comments like, "Why do women need separate groups? Why does it have to be up gender? Why is it so exclusionary? Why does it have to be only black people?" Oh, because we know problems exist. Allowing people a safe space to just exist. What's the problem with that? What is that? They're not saying no, they're not saying we're better than you. They're just like, "Hey, come over here where you won't have these microaggressions, where it's a safe space for you to talk about such things." Okay. And I feel like, especially in the photography industry, where some things feel quite male dominated, and I love that it's a vast variety of people, but I will say, sometimes I am in the pit and I'm the only female photographer. Sometimes I'm at events, I'm the only female photographer. Sometimes I am very important events, and I'm the photographer, and I'm spoken to like I am a child who has wandered in, and yet the guy who is carrying my kit is treated like the photographer, and he's just the assistant. Do you know what I mean? It happens, okay? There is also this problem where women who intentionally center themselves are suddenly now basically being questions the legitimacy of that. Why is it a problem where women focus initiatives are being questioned because they exist? And yet, when it's International Women's Day, everyone jumps on it and puts up, "I got these are the top 5 photographers and female photographers that you need to know." Meh. Well, that's not a problem. International Men's Day exists, by the way, guys. It does exist. I just don't think you make a bigger deal out of it. And women have always have had it difficult in the workplace, and it was only till not too long ago that women in the military, if you got knocked up, you had to be out in the military. Okay, there are still jokes like women. There are literally a Facebook group to give women the legal advice on pregnant and screwed employment or something, where women who are disadvantaged because they've taken maternity to have their child, and even simple things like the bosses not giving them the keeping in touch things, not keeping them up to date with business moves. One woman was in that group saying, "I went to work and I had no one had told me they'd moved premises. No one had told me. And when I was late, they said, well, you should have done your research." Well, why would I think the whole business would change and move location? Why didn't you tell me? Okay. I think sometimes people immediately view inclusive efforts as exclusion, and there's a very important distinction. They are not harming anyone. They're allowing a space for people who understand what's happened to them to discuss and create work together and be able to ask people about things. I cannot say I know what it's like to be a black female photographer. I know what it's like to be a female photographer in my age range and with my lifestyle. But you know what? Sometimes I have seen it. I've seen it. Do you know what? In fact, I was shooting many years ago for it was a music video. I was doing unit stills, and they were like, "Oh, we need some edgier, grittier models, maybe more urban." And I was looking around, and like some of these girls were hip hop dancers, and I was like, what you want about gritty urban? I don't understand it." And they're like, "You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like more ghetto." And I knew then what they were gonna do. They went, sure enough, and just picked all the girls of color, black girls, bringing them to the front. I'm like, yeah, yeah, really, suck those teeth, really give us it. And I was like, oh, let them play into stereotypes, mate. Like, come on now. This conversation is very layered, all right? And I know I'm ranting about this because I'm not doing it probably the best justice. I'm probably speaking out of turn. But do you know what? So much is dealt with by women, particularly women of color. I've seen my friends deal with sexism, racism, tokenism, underrepresentation, stereotyping, visibility barriers all simultaneously. And again, I need to acknowledge my own limitations here. I can only talk from experiences. I cannot say my experiences are identical to women of color because and other marginalized groups within photography because it can't. I think part of making industries better is understanding that inclusion isn't one size fits all. Listening matters, and actually hearing people and not becoming defensive immediately matters. This is not I hate men. This is why are there so many women in education in photography or in the beginner stages, but not as many progressing into professional photography as people were saying. And this is all anecdotal evidence based on what I'm seeing because I saw in one of the groups they did a chart, a little pie chart of how many people in the group were professionals or how many were enthusiasts, and a lot of them were just sitting as enthusiastically. Okay, so given how big the group is, there wasn't that many professionals. Is it because the group doesn't attract professionals? Perhaps, but given how big this group is, I was a little bit shocked there weren't more professionals in it. I thought, let's just do this is just anecdotal like research. I went into a portrait group and I looked at the last 20 posts and they were all male, but one. Okay. So then let's go to the wedding group. And in the wedding group, it's a little bit different. Of the last 20 posts, five were by women, 15 by men. Oh, sorry. Uh, 13 by men. I couldn't tell on the other two because it only linked to a business page and I couldn't see the about page on them. I then went to a street photography group, 20 all men. What else did I do? I went to the boudoir session. It was a little bit different. There was of the 20, there were 11 men and 9 women in the new post. And then in the baby one, it was for all women. All women. There was nothing. In the maternity, all women. There was in the last 20 posts. It was just going off the last 20, and that's I felt like that was a good spread across. So yeah, we have seen women building educational platforms, podcasts, this one, YouTube channels, mine, communities, workshops, and mentoring spaces, entire businesses built independently. And that is incredible. Utterly incredible. But social media has complicated this whole situation more. Because while it has genuinely helped women build independent businesses, um, and allowed us not to wait for traditional gatekeeping, it has meant that we're sometimes receiving tougher scrutiny, appearance-based comments, as I stated earlier in this episode, credibility challenge, harassment, dismissive behavior, and sexualization. And I think that pressure wears someone down over time. I can tell you now, there's a group on Facebook for model safety. And in there, photographers talk about the things we get. I regularly get a man who gets off on phoning me and telling me lewd things. I've blocked his number. He calls me back on a different number. In fact, he does the rounds on a lot of the female photographers in the area. We talk about it on various of the groups. I don't see any men talking about it. So I have asked. They said they've never experienced that. I also have had people behave appallingly at photo shoots. I remember maybe I told you, I was at a wedding and I was just the assistant photographer, second shoot, sorry. and I got touched up. In fact, I have a really good story about a well-known hotel. So it was just before it closed to become a center for something else. It was a really big hotel not far from here. It was one of the last times we got some new owners, and I was mic'd up by the videographer because he wanted me to test where if the sound was good in all the corners of this reception room. So I'd gone in, I was photographing the cake, which had just been put ready for the reception to begin. And the bride and groom had gone up to change into their second outfit. So, and they didn't want me up there. There was a 20-minute gap. So I was there doing my pictures, and the maitre d', I believe that's what we call him, the main guy, the main manager of the waiting staff, whatever. He walked up to me and said something really lewd and inappropriate, and it boomed across the room. So the videographer heard it. What also happened is that some of the guests who were sat on the patio also heard it, turned round, and that was me at work. Now, again, it's an individual, but can you imagine if another photographer heard that and was like, "Oh my God, is that normal?" I didn't know how to react. I told him to go away, and he proceeded to essentially tell me that if I made a fuss, he could get me kicked out and it'd ruin my business. I did make a fuss. I didn't have to actually in the end because the videographer said, "I've got it recorded. Do you want to hear what he said to her?" And it was not pleasant. It was not, I'm at work, okay? I get that's more about the personality, but I didn't see the videographer getting that abuse. I didn't get, now that's not to say I haven't seen male creatives being abused. I've seen hen parties notoriously inappropriate. I've seen people who have got drunk at weddings be inappropriate. I've also had people just like mimic me when I've told them they can't play with things. Like someone tried to get my camera out of my bag to take photos of their own. I was like, please don't touch that. And they're like, please don't touch that. I was like, no, don't touch that. And the videographer was like, yeah, don't touch that. And they responded to him better than they did me. Again, this is individuals, but these kind of things, even though it's individuals, weigh down on women. And when we tell these stories and we talk about this and share this, often we get told, like, what did you do? What happened? What could I have done that made someone want to do that? What is justifiably okay to do that? Tell me, because it's just not. And it does get you down. It does wear you down. Now, I don't think this gets fixed through performative nonsense. We aren't going to fix this overnight. It's not through some pink camera strap, some fake empowerment campaigns, diversity panels once a year. I think meaningful change looks more like diverse representation consistently, platforming different voices long term and short term, taking women seriously technically, safer networking spaces, challenging problematic behavior, not just by the individual who's experienced it, but those who witness it, okay? Understanding caregiving reality. Sometimes people can't do as much because they have stuff at home to do. Challenging dismissive culture, not punishing women for having ambition and being disrespectful about it. So what if she wants to do that job? So what if she's really blunt? I don't care. She's allowed to be. Respecting genres often associated with women. And I don't think that's so much of a case now, but I wanted to put that in because someone mentioned that in the LinkedIn thing. And honestly, sometimes it starts with listening instead of immediately getting defensive and claiming, oh my God, Khandie hates men. It's not that at all. Like I said, it is small interactions that have a big impact. If you're one person and you've had a lot of these impacts, small interactions, and people have been like this, it weighs you down. In the end, you don't want to be a part of something that doesn't feel comfortable for you. Okay. It is not all men. And if you could get that out of your head and go, do you know what, let's have a discussion. Why aren't women? I want to hear from you. Because if we don't, these kinds of conversations die and people like just blast it off. I was another woman whinging about it. She was like, I don't want someone just given a space because wait, we need a woman in that space. Get them in. What I'm saying is, why aren't there? Where have these women dropped in? We have got incredibly talented women. Why aren't they being platformed? Is there something? I'm not saying, oh, just grab the woman, chuck her on the panel. What I'm saying is, where is the stop? What's the block? How block? Had they decided they just don't want to do it, or are they not applying? And if they're not applying, why aren't they applying? Like, I think this conversation is bigger than us because women do belong in photography and they already do and they already are here. Women are everywhere in this industry, teaching, creating, leading communities, supporting clients, building business, and making incredible work. And I do think many are exhausted. I think this industry has a retention problem. That's it. We have a retention problem. And not necessarily because one massive obvious barrier, but because of hundreds of smaller pressures that build up over the years. And lots of these pressures are for men as well. But given the fact that when someone says 80, 70% of my classroom are female, but he said that only a few of them graduate to go on to be photographers, some of them go do something else. What's happened? Where are we losing them? And as I said in those Facebook groups, I just did it anecdotally. There are so many of them. Well, where are the women? Maybe they're not on Facebook. Maybe they don't want to comment. But why aren't they commenting? Is there a prevention there? Is there something stopping them? We are going to end up with a lot of talented people being pushed out, burnt, or unheard. And maybe that's something we need to examine, not whether women are entering photography, but what kind of industry you're asking them to survive in once they get here. But honestly, I'd love to know your experiences. Maybe I'm waffling for the sake of waffling. Maybe I've missed it all wrong. Maybe I've said something wrong. And I hope you understand this is me trying my best. I wrote a script about 4 times on this because obviously there's some nuance in there I need to keep. And I also want to reiterate the privilege I have as someone with a platform. But it was an interesting dialogue on LinkedIn to see this. It was interesting for me to see it, and then to look at the stats. And people. There was another one done a few years ago on how many people are in what industry. I was in the corporate group. There's a corporate Facebook group, and I was just quickly looking, just a casual, the first 20 odd posts. There was one from me there, so that counts. And that was a little bit more of an even split. I thought that was quite nice. But it was unusual that certain genres attract more people. Why does it attract more people? What is it? What is it? Is there a disconnect? And the other thing is, I looked at a couple of the big brands and I was looking at them and going, who are their ambassadors? And yes, most ambassadors seem to be men. Why is that? Is there not people with the platform? Okay, if they haven't got the platform, why aren't women getting the platform? Why aren't women pursuing heavily like social media so much? What is the thing? And I was just interested. Maybe I've missed it entirely. And again, I'm not saying people should just be given a space to make up the numbers. People should earn their space, but what's preventing women being recognized for when they are earning, or have they not earned enough to be placed there? In that case, if they're doing all the education, what is the imbalance? What's happened? Where have we lost it? Where have we lost them? I will say, I have think we are better now than when I first started, but I'm just curious if you're noticing it. Okay. What made you stay in the industry? What made you feel like quitting? Is what still needs to change? It'd be interesting to have this discussion. And no, I repeat again, this is not a man hating episode. Yes, my examples are about individual men. You are correct. But as somebody who's had it happen to them, can you imagine how that made me feel each time something like that happened? And individuals have the ability to make people feel uncomfortable. And the internet is a horrible place for this. We know that. In person, it's not so bad in my experience, except for the men who accused me of sleeping with my mother, or at least asking me which one I had slept with. That's inappropriate, but I'm just curious. I'm just curious. And as ever, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. And yes, this might have caused some ruffle feathers, but I felt like, given how people were commenting on this LinkedIn, it made for a good episode, if nothing else. If I offend you, it was not my intention. But if you have a problem with what I say, at least discuss it with me like adults and don't comment on the lack of pronunciation clearly or my weird accent or, yeah. Anyway, take care.